In a quiet Victorian home on Christmas Eve, a 65-year-old retired librarian was about to receive a gift that would destroy her family forever. What started as an unexpected delivery took a shocking turn when beautiful Belgian chocolates arrived from her estranged daughter. Claire Maxwell wasn't your typical lonely mother. For 3 years, she had lived in bitter isolation, known for her unforgiving judgment of those who disappointed her. When she impulsively gave away Emma's gift to her daughter's former best friend, she had no idea she was becoming an unwitting accomplice to attempted murder. What began as petty spite would become a nightmare of betrayal and justice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Claire Maxwell's fingers traced the edge of her teacup, the porcelain cool against her skin, as she sat in the wingback chair that had been her husband's favorite. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times, its resonant notes echoing through the Victorian home that felt too large for one person, especially on Christmas Eve. Outside, snow had begun to dust the bare branches of the oak tree Robert had planted 30 years ago, back when Emma was 2 and still believed in magic. The house bore witness to her solitude with oppressive silence. Every surface gleamed with meticulous care. The mahogany side tables free of dust, the Persian rugs perfectly aligned, the Christmas tree standing in the front window like a monument to traditions that no longer held meaning. Claire had decorated it out of habit rather than joy, each ornament placed with the same precision she'd once applied to organizing library collections. The angel at the top, Emma's favorite when she was 7, seemed to watch her with knowing eyes. 3 years. 3 Christmases without so much as a card from her daughter. Claire had stopped expecting anything, had trained herself not to check the mailbox with the desperate hope she'd once felt. The phone calls had dwindled first, from weekly to monthly to special occasions only, each conversation growing more strained until even those ceased. The last words they'd exchanged still burned in Claire's memory. "I can't keep trying to earn your approval, Mom. I'm done pretending we're a family." The doorbell's sharp ring cut through her reverie like a blade. Claire set down her teacup with deliberate care, her librarian's instincts demanding order, even in surprise. She moved to the front door with measured steps, her wool slippers silent on the hardwood floors. Through the beveled glass, she could see the silhouette of a delivery person, shoulders hunched against the cold. "Mrs. Maxwell?" The young woman's breath formed clouds in the frigid air. "Package for you. Merry Christmas." Claire accepted the elegantly wrapped box with hands that trembled slightly, though whether from cold or emotion she couldn't say. The package was substantial, wrapped in cream-colored paper with a burgundy ribbon that reminded her of the wine she and Robert used to share on special occasions. No return address marked the pristine surface, only her name written in careful script. "Thank you," she managed. But the delivery person was already walking back to her van, eager to escape the bitter December night. Claire closed the door and leaned against it, studying the package as if it might reveal its secrets through examination alone. The wrapping was expensive, not the kind of paper one picked up at the grocery store, but something chosen with care. Her fingers found the small card tucked beneath the ribbon, and her breath caught as she recognized the handwriting. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Love, Emma." The words seemed to blur before her eyes. Love. Such a simple word, yet one that had been absent from their interactions for so long. Claire carried the package to the kitchen, her movements automatic as she cleared a space on the counter. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows as she worked the ribbon free with fingers that had lost their steadiness. Inside, nestled in tissue paper like precious jewels, lay 24 Belgian chocolates. Each piece was a work of art, some dark, some milk, some white, adorned with delicate swirls and dustings of gold. Claire recognized the quality immediately. These were the kind of chocolates she used to buy for Emma's birthday when money wasn't tight, when she could afford such luxuries without calculating the impact on her fixed income. She lifted one chocolate carefully, examining its perfect surface. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each piece uniform yet unique. Some were topped with nuts, almonds and hazelnuts carefully placed like tiny crowns. Others bore the subtle sheen of filled centers, promising flavors of caramel or raspberry, or perhaps the brandied cherries Emma had loved as a child. But why now? Why, after 3 years of silence, would Emma send such an expensive, thoughtful gift? Claire's analytical mind, honed by decades of research and cataloging, began to dissect the gesture with the same methodical approach she'd once applied to processing new acquisitions. Was this an olive branch, an attempt at reconciliation, or something else entirely? She set the chocolate back in its place and reached for her cordless phone, Emma's number still programmed despite the years of silence. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before Emma's voicemail picked up, the same professional message she'd used since starting her consulting firm. "Emma, it's your mother. I received your gift tonight. It was unexpected. I hoped we might talk. Please call me back." The words felt inadequate, failing to capture the complex emotions churning within her. How did one respond to kindness after years of estrangement? How did one begin to bridge a chasm that had been years in the making? Claire returned to the chocolates, her librarian's instincts demanding closer examination. She noticed the way they were arranged, not randomly, but with careful consideration for color and type. The darker chocolates formed a rough heart shape in the center, while the lighter ones created a border. Had Emma arranged them this way, or was it merely the chocolatier's artistic vision? A memory surfaced unbidden. Emma, at 12, carefully arranging cookies on a plate for the church bake sale. "Presentation matters, Mom," she'd said with the seriousness of a much older child. "People eat with their eyes first." Even then, Emma had understood the power of appearance, the way things could be made to seem more appealing with the right arrangement. The thought brought others in its wake, like dominoes falling in reverse chronological order. Emma at 16, coming home with her first business plan for a neighborhood lawn care service, only to have Claire dismiss it as, quote, 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 22, excited about her marketing degree and full of plans for starting her own agency, while Claire worried aloud about the instability of entrepreneurship. Emma at 28, successful and confident, trying one last time to share her achievements with a mother who could only see. "You never believed in me," Emma had said during their last phone call. "Not once. Dad would have been proud, but you only ever saw what could go wrong." Claire had wanted to protest, to explain that her concerns came from love, from a desire to protect her daughter from disappointment and failure. But the words had caught in her throat, strangled by the weight of her own pride, and the terrible realization that Emma might be right. The kettle's whistle drew her back to the present. Claire made fresh tea, Earl Grey with a splash of milk, the way Robert used to take it. She carried her cup to the kitchen table and sat facing the chocolates, studying them as if they might yield answers to questions she wasn't sure how to ask. Outside, the snow continued to fall, transforming the familiar landscape into something softer, more forgiving. The streetlights cast pools of amber warmth on the sidewalk where Emma used to build snow angels, where she'd learned to ride her bicycle with Robert running alongside, where she'd waited for the school bus each morning with a backpack full of dreams and possibilities. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, like memories belonging to someone else. The woman who had read bedtime stories and kissed scraped knees seemed like a stranger now, replaced by someone harder, more critical, less generous, with both affection and approval. When had she become this person? When had protection become criticism? And love become a series of conditions Emma could never quite meet? The chocolates remained untouched on the counter, beautiful and mysterious in their elegant box. Claire found herself reluctant to disturb their perfect arrangement, as if eating them might somehow break whatever spell had prompted Emma to send them. Instead, she sipped her tea and watched the snow, waiting for something she couldn't name, an epiphany perhaps, or the courage to examine the role she'd played in the destruction of the most important relationship in her life. The grandfather clock chimed 8, then 9, then 10. Claire remained at the kitchen table, surrounded by the detritus of Christmas past, the cards from neighbors she barely knew, the catalogs for gifts she wouldn't buy, the calendar that would soon mark another year gone by. The chocolates sat in their box like an accusation and a promise, beautiful and untouched, waiting for morning and whatever decisions it might bring. The morning light filtered through Claire's lace curtains, with the pale weakness of winter sun, casting delicate shadows across the kitchen where the chocolates still sat in their elegant box. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through fragments of memories and half-formed regrets, the gift serving as both accusation and olive branch in equal measure. The doorbell's chime at 10:30 came as a surprise. Claire smoothed her wool cardigan and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror before answering, her librarian's sense of propriety intact, even in her current emotional turmoil. Victoria Chen stood on the doorstep, her arms wrapped around a bottle of wine, her smile carefully practiced but not quite reaching her eyes. She wore an expensive coat. Cashmere, Claire noted with the automatic assessment of someone who'd spent years cataloging quality, and her dark hair was styled with the kind of precision that spoke of regular salon visits. Mrs. Maxwell. Victoria's voice carried the forced brightness of someone making an effort. Merry Christmas. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. Claire's fingers tightened on the doorframe. She hadn't spoken to Victoria in over a year, not since the woman had moved back to the neighborhood after her business dealings with Emma had soured so spectacularly. The sight of her now, on Christmas morning, felt like salt in a wound that had never properly healed. Victoria. The name emerged clipped, professional. This is unexpected. I brought this for you. Victoria lifted the wine. A Bordeaux, Claire noticed, the kind that cost more than Claire's weekly grocery budget. I know the holidays can be difficult when you're alone. The presumption rankled. Victoria Chen, who'd betrayed Emma's trust for her own financial gain, standing here offering sympathy about loneliness. Claire's jaw tightened, but decades of social conditioning won out over her irritation. Please, come in. It's cold. Victoria stepped into the foyer, her heels clicking on the hardwood as she took in the pristine Victorian interior. Your home is beautiful. So orderly. There was something in her tone that made Claire bristle. A subtle condescension that reminded her why she'd never particularly liked Victoria. Even before the business with Emma, the woman had always carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed her success, who saw other people as stepping stones rather than individuals worthy of respect. Would you like coffee? Claire asked, leading the way to the kitchen. That would be lovely. Victoria settled into one of the Windsor chairs at Claire's breakfast table, her gaze immediately falling on the chocolate box. Oh, how beautiful! A Christmas gift? Claire's hand paused on the coffee canister. The chocolates sat exactly where she'd left them the night before, their perfect arrangement mocking her with Emma's absent thoughtfulness. A dangerous idea began to form in her mind. Petty, spiteful, and deeply satisfying. From a friend, she heard herself say, the lie sliding out with surprising ease. Belgian. Quite expensive, I'm told. Victoria's eyes lit up with genuine interest. They look exquisite. The presentation is remarkable. Please, help yourself. The words emerged before Claire could fully consider their implications, driven by a surge of vindictive satisfaction. If Victoria wanted to play the concerned neighbor, if she wanted to intrude on Claire's Christmas morning with her false sympathy and expensive wine, then she could serve as the recipient of Emma's misguided gesture. Are you sure? Victoria was already reaching toward the box, her fingers hovering over a particularly elaborate piece topped with a delicate almond. I don't want to impose. I insist. Claire busied herself with the coffee, measuring grounds with mechanical precision while Victoria selected her first chocolate. The sound of her small, appreciative hum made Claire's jaw clench. These are incredible, Victoria said, already reaching for a second piece. This one dark chocolate with what appeared to be hazelnuts pressed into its surface. Your friend has excellent taste. They must care about you very much. The irony wasn't lost on Claire. Emma's gift, intended as some form of peace offering or manipulation, now served as entertainment for the woman who'd nearly destroyed her daughter's business. There was a poetic justice in it that appealed to Claire's sense of symmetry, even as a small voice in the back of her mind whispered warnings about the pettiness of her actions. Victoria, Claire said, settling across from her with 2 steaming mugs. I haven't seen you around the neighborhood much lately. I've been traveling for work, trying to rebuild some professional relationships. Victoria's expression flickered with what might have been shame before settling back into its practiced pleasantness. I know there were complications with some of my previous business dealings. Complications. Such a sanitized word for what had actually happened. Claire remembered Emma's tear-stained phone calls, the way her daughter's voice had shaken as she described Victoria's betrayal, how her best friend and business partner had secretly negotiated a deal that excluded Emma entirely, stealing their shared concept and leaving Emma financially devastated. Emma mentioned something about that, Claire said carefully, watching Victoria's reaction. Victoria's hand paused halfway to the chocolate box. I haven't spoken to Emma in years. How is she doing? The casual tone didn't fool Claire. There was something predatory in Victoria's interest, a hunger that had nothing to do with the chocolates she continued to sample. 3 pieces now, Claire counted, each one disappearing with methodical efficiency. She's doing well, Claire replied, though she realized with a start that she had no idea if that was true. Her consulting firm is quite successful. I'm glad to hear it. Victoria selected another chocolate, this one milk chocolate, with what appeared to be a caramel center. I always admired Emma's determination. Even when we were young, she had such focus. There was something unsettling about the way Victoria said it, as if Emma's focus had been somehow excessive or unnatural. Claire found herself studying Victoria's face more carefully, noting the way her eyes never quite met Claire's directly, how her smile seemed calculated rather than genuine. These chocolates really are exceptional, Victoria continued, reaching for yet another piece. You'll have to tell me where your friend purchased them. I'd love to order some for my clients. Claire felt a flicker of unease as she watched Victoria consume Emma's gift with such casual enthusiasm. The woman's appetite seemed almost compulsive, driven by something more than simple appreciation for fine chocolate. But the satisfaction of her petty revenge overrode her growing discomfort. They made stilted conversation for another 20 minutes. Victoria asking careful questions about the neighborhood changes, Claire providing equally careful answers while Victoria continued to sample the chocolates. When Victoria finally stood to leave, she'd consumed nearly half the box. Thank you so much for the coffee and the wonderful chocolates, Victoria said, gathering her coat. It's been lovely catching up. Of course. Claire walked her to the door, noting how Victoria's cheeks seemed slightly flushed, though that could have been from the warmth of the house after the cooled morning air. Would it be terrible of me to ask for a few to take home? Victoria's laugh sounded forced. They really are extraordinary. Claire felt another surge of vindictive pleasure. Please, take as many as you'd like. I couldn't possibly eat them all myself. Victoria selected 6 more chocolates, wrapping them carefully in a napkin Claire provided. You're too generous. Have a wonderful Christmas, Mrs. Maxwell. As the door closed behind Victoria, Claire stood in her foyer feeling simultaneously satisfied and hollow. Emma's gift, whatever it had meant, whatever olive branch or manipulation it represented, was now mostly gone, consumed by the woman who'd betrayed her daughter's trust. The symmetry of it appealed to her sense of justice, even as she recognized the pettiness of her actions. She returned to the kitchen and stared at the decimated chocolate box. Only 8 pieces remained of Emma's elegant arrangement, the careful heart pattern now broken and meaningless. The house felt quieter somehow, as if her act of spite had absorbed some essential warmth from the air. Outside, Victoria's car pulled away from the curb, disappearing around the corner toward her own house 6 blocks away. Claire wondered, with a mixture of satisfaction and growing unease, what Victoria would think when she discovered who had really sent those chocolates. The grandfather clock chimed 11, marking another hour of Christmas Day that Claire would spend alone with her choices and their consequences. Claire had just settled into her afternoon routine. Tea, yesterday's crossword puzzle, and the mindless comfort of a Christmas movie she'd seen dozens of times, when the phone's shrill ring shattered the fragile peace she'd constructed around her solitude. Mrs. Maxwell? The voice was breathless, panicked. This is Janet Reeves, Victoria Chen's neighbor. I'm calling from the hospital. Victoria collapsed about an hour ago. The paramedic said she was asking for you. The crossword puzzle slipped from Claire's fingers, scattering to the floor in a flutter of black and white squares. What do you mean, collapsed? I found her on her front steps, couldn't breathe, her face all swollen. The EMTs said something about an allergic reaction. She kept saying your name, Mrs. Maxwell. I thought you should know. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Claire's teacup rattled against its saucer as she set it down with trembling hands. The chocolates. The thought struck her like a physical blow, sending ice through her veins. Which hospital? St. Mary's. She's in the emergency room. Mrs. Maxwell. It looked really bad. The line went dead, leaving Claire staring at the phone as if it might offer some explanation, some alternative reality where Victoria's collapse had nothing to do with the expensive Belgian chocolates that were now sitting in Claire's kitchen like evidence of a crime she'd committed without understanding. Her hands shook as she dialed for a taxi, her mind racing through possibilities she didn't want to consider. Food poisoning, perhaps. A coincidence. People had allergic reactions to things all the time. It didn't have to be connected to Emma's gift. But even as she tried to rationalize, a cold certainty was settling in her chest like a stone. The ride to St. Mary's passed in a blur of Christmas decorations and families hurrying home with armloads of presents. Claire pressed her face to the window, watching the normal world continue its celebration while her own reality crumbled with each passing block. What had she done? What had her petty act of spite set in motion? The emergency room was a chaos of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. Claire approached the reception desk on unsteady legs, her wool coat suddenly feeling inadequate against the institutional chill. I'm looking for Victoria Chen, she managed. She was brought in with an allergic reaction. The nurse, a young woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders, consulted her computer. Are you family? I'm a friend, her neighbor called me. Room 3, but you'll need to speak with Dr. Kim first. She's treating Ms. Chen. Dr. Sarah Kim appeared moments later, still wearing scrubs that bore the evidence of her work, small stains that spoke of urgent procedures and life-or-death decisions. She was younger than Claire had expected, perhaps 40, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that had seen too much suffering to be easily deceived. Mrs. Maxwell? I'm Dr. Kim. Ms. Chen is stable, but it was close. Very close. She gestured toward a small consultation room away from the main bustle. We need to talk. Claire followed, her legs feeling disconnected from her body. The room was sterile, impersonal, containing only a small table and 2 chairs that had seen countless difficult conversations. Miss Chen suffered severe anaphylaxis, Dr. Kim began without preamble. Her airway was compromised, her blood pressure dropped dangerously low. Another 10 minutes and we would have lost her. Anaphylaxis, Claire repeated, the medical term feeling foreign on her tongue. A severe allergic reaction. Her body's immune system essentially attacked itself in response to an allergen. In Ms. Chen's case, nuts. Specifically, what appears to be a concentrated exposure to both almonds and hazelnuts. The room seemed to tilt around Claire. She gripped the edge of the table, fighting against the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm her. Nuts, she whispered. Mrs. Maxwell, Ms. Chen mentioned that she'd eaten chocolates at your house this morning. Chocolates that contained nuts, is that correct? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Claire found herself studying Dr. Kim's face, searching for judgment, for condemnation, but finding only professional concern and an expectation of honesty. Yes, Claire heard herself say. She had some chocolates. Several of them contained nuts. I could see the almonds and hazelnuts on top of some pieces. Dr. Kim nodded, making notes on her clipboard. Did you know about Ms. Chen's allergy? Claire's mind raced backward through years of neighborhood interactions, school functions, casual conversations. And then, like a knife through her consciousness, the memory surfaced. Emma, at 16, coming home from a sleepover at Victoria's house. Mom, did you know Victoria's allergic to nuts? Like, really allergic. Her mom has to carry one of those pen things everywhere. The memory was crystal clear now. Emma's casual mention of Victoria's EpiPen, the way she described Victoria's mother's vigilance about reading ingredient labels, checking with restaurants, the constant awareness that surrounded Victoria's daily life. Emma had known. Of course Emma had known. "Mrs. Maxwell?" Dr. Kim's voice seemed to come from very far away. "She's allergic to nuts," Claire said slowly, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. "I remember now. My daughter mentioned it years ago." "Your daughter?" Claire looked up, meeting Dr. Kim's steady gaze. In those eyes, she saw the reflection of a terrible truth she could no longer avoid. "The chocolates. They were a gift from my daughter, Emma." Dr. Kim's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something that might have been understanding, or perhaps suspicion. "Your daughter sent you chocolates containing nuts, and you gave them to someone you knew was allergic to nuts?" "I didn't remember," Claire said quickly, then stopped. That wasn't entirely true. She hadn't remembered consciously, but some part of her had known. Some buried awareness had been there when she'd made the decision to give Victoria Emma's gift. I forgot about the allergy." "Mrs. Maxwell, I need you to be completely honest with me. Miss Chen's life hung by a thread today. If there's anything else about these chocolates, anything at all, I need to know." Claire felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the terrible understanding that her petty act of spite had nearly killed someone. But beneath that immediate horror, a darker realization was taking shape. Emma had sent chocolates containing nuts. Emma, who knew about Victoria's allergy. Emma, who had every reason to hate Victoria for her betrayal. "I need to call my daughter," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Kim studied her for a long moment. "Mrs. Maxwell, I think you need to call the police first." The words hit Claire like a physical blow. Police. Investigation. Her daughter, her Emma, investigated for attempted murder. The thought was so monstrous, so impossible, that Claire's mind recoiled from it even as the evidence arranged itself with terrible clarity. "Can I see her?" Claire asked instead. "Victoria?" Dr. Kim hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. She's sedated, but conscious." Victoria looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, her face still swollen, her breathing assisted by a nasal cannula. When she saw Claire, her eyes widened with something that might have been fear. "The chocolates," Victoria whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed an hour earlier. "Where did they come from?" Claire stood frozen at the foot of the bed, unable to form words. How could she explain that her petty jealousy had nearly cost Victoria her life? How could she admit that she'd given away a gift that might have been intended as a weapon? "Victoria, I'm so sorry," she managed finally. "Who sent them?" Victoria's voice was stronger now, more insistent. "Claire, who gave you those chocolates?" "Doctor." Kim appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. "Mrs. Maxwell, there's a Detective Santos here to see you. I think it's time we got some answers." As Claire turned to face whatever came next, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window of Victoria's room. The woman staring back looked older, smaller, diminished by the weight of consequences she was only beginning to understand. The chocolates had been beautiful, expensive, perfectly crafted. But like everything else about Emma's gift, their appearance had hidden something far more dangerous. The grandfather clock in her empty house would soon chime 3 o'clock, marking another hour in what was becoming the longest day of Claire's life. Detective Ray Santos had the kind of face that inspired confessions, weathered enough to suggest experience, kind enough to encourage trust, but sharp enough to catch lies before they fully formed. He appeared in the hospital corridor like a man accustomed to being summoned to places where families fell apart, his gray wool coat still bearing traces of snow from the Christmas afternoon that was rapidly becoming something else entirely. "Mrs. Maxwell?" His voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who'd learned to withhold judgment until all the facts emerged. "I'm Detective Santos. Dr. Kim asked me to speak with you about Ms. Chen's condition." Claire found herself studying his hands as he pulled out a small notebook. Steady, unadorned, the hands of someone who wrote down truths for a living. She wondered what he would write about her. What words he would use to describe a woman who had given away chocolates without remembering they might kill the recipient. "Is this really necessary?" Claire asked, though she knew the answer even as the words left her mouth. "Victoria's going to be fine, isn't she?" "Ms. Chen nearly died today, Mrs. Maxwell. When someone experiences a life-threatening allergic reaction to food they consumed at another person's home, we have to investigate. It's procedure." Santos settled into the chair across from her in the small consultation room, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. "Dr. Kim mentioned that you gave Ms. Chen chocolates this morning. Chocolates that contained nuts. Yes." The word emerged smaller than Claire intended. "And these chocolates were a gift to you?" Claire's throat felt dry. "From my daughter, Emma." Santos made a note, his pen scratching across the paper with quiet authority. "When did you receive this gift?" "Last night. Christmas Eve. Had you been expecting it?" The question caught Claire off guard. She found herself remembering her surprise at the doorbell, her shock at seeing Emma's handwriting on the card. "No, we haven't spoken in 3 years." Santos looked up from his notebook, and Claire saw something flicker in his expression. Not judgment, but a kind of professional recognition, as if he'd encountered this particular brand of family dysfunction before. 3 years is a long time," he said carefully. "What caused the estrangement?" Claire felt heat rise in her cheeks. How could she explain the gradual erosion of their relationship, the way her criticism had poisoned every interaction until Emma simply stopped trying? "We disagreed about her life choices, her career. I thought she was being reckless." "Reckless how?" "She started her own business, marketing consulting. I thought it was unstable, impractical." The words sounded petty even to her own ears. "I wanted her to have security." Santos nodded, making another note. "And Ms. Chen? How does she fit into your relationship with your daughter?" This was the question Claire had been dreading. She pressed her hands together in her lap, feeling the weight of her wedding ring. Robert's ring, which she still wore 10 years after his death, because taking it off felt like admitting she was truly alone. Victoria and Emma were friends, business partners, actually. Until Victoria. Claire paused, searching for the right words. Until Victoria betrayed her. Betrayed her how? They had developed a business concept together, some kind of marketing platform. Victoria went behind Emma's back and negotiated a deal with investors that excluded Emma entirely. She stole their shared work and left Emma with nothing. Santos's pen stopped moving. When did this happen? About 5 years ago. Emma was devastated. Financially, emotionally. She'd trusted Victoria completely. "And you knew about Ms. Chen's nut allergy?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Claire found herself staring at her hands, at the pale band of skin where her wedding ring had protected her finger from the sun for 40 years. "My daughter mentioned it once. Years ago. I had forgotten." Forgotten. Santos repeated the word without inflection, but Claire heard the skepticism beneath his professional tone. Yes. The lie tasted bitter. She hadn't forgotten. Not entirely. Some part of her had known. Had perhaps even been influenced by that buried knowledge when she'd made the decision to give Victoria Emma's gift. "Mrs. Maxwell, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." Santos leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "When you gave Miss Chen those chocolates, did any part of you remember her allergy?" Claire felt the room grow smaller around her. This was the moment of reckoning. The place where she could either admit to the petty malice that had motivated her actions, or continue down a path that was beginning to feel like quicksand. "I was angry," she said finally, "at Emma for sending the gift, at Victoria for showing up at my house uninvited. I wanted to hurt someone, I suppose, but I never intended." She couldn't finish the sentence. Santos made several notes, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Maxwell, I need to examine the remaining chocolates. Are they still at your house?" "Yes, there are about 8 left. We'll need to have them tested by our forensics team to determine exactly what allergens they contain and in what concentrations." The word forensics sent a chill through Claire. This was becoming real in a way she hadn't anticipated. Not just a family crisis or a medical emergency, but a potential crime scene with evidence and suspects and consequences that extended far beyond her quiet Victorian home. Will Emma be in trouble? The question escaped before Claire could stop it. Santos studied her face carefully. That depends on what we find. If these chocolates were deliberately contaminated with allergens, if someone knew about Miss Chen's condition and intended to cause harm, then yes, there could be serious charges. But Emma sent them to me, not to Victoria. She couldn't have known I would give them away. Couldn't she? Santos asked quietly. You said you and your daughter haven't spoken in 3 years, but she sent you an expensive gift. Why do you think she did that? Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. I don't know. Has your daughter ever asked about Ms. Chen? About her health, her living situation, whether you still see her? The memory came back in pieces. Phone calls from years ago. Emma asking casual questions about the neighborhood, about who still lived where. Claire had attributed it to nostalgia, to Emma's natural curiosity about her childhood home. But now, viewed through the lens of attempted murder, those innocent questions took on a sinister cast. She might have, Claire admitted, years ago. I thought she was just making conversation. Santos closed his notebook and stood up. Mrs. Maxwell, I'm going to need you to come to the station tomorrow to make a formal statement. In the meantime, please don't touch the remaining chocolates, and don't contact your daughter. Don't contact Emma? But surely she deserves to know what happened. Mrs. Maxwell, Santos's voice carried a new gravity. If your daughter deliberately sent chocolates containing allergens to your home, knowing about your relationship with Ms. Chen and counting on your predictable response, then she used you as a weapon in an attempted murder. Until we know for certain what happened, Emma Maxwell Morrison is a suspect in a felony assault case. The words hit Claire like physical blows. Suspect. Felony assault. Her Emma who used to braid flowers into chains for her dolls, who had cried when they found a dead bird in the backyard, who had once spent her allowance on a birthday card for a classmate no one else liked. I need to go home, Claire said, her voice barely audible. Of course, but Mrs. Maxwell? Santos paused at the door. Whatever happens next, remember that you were manipulated too. If Emma did plan this, she counted on your reaction. She used your emotions, your relationship with Ms. Chen, your own capacity for spite. That doesn't excuse what happened, but it doesn't make you a murderer either. As Claire made her way through the hospital corridors, past the Christmas decorations and the happy families visiting patients, she felt the weight of Santos's words settling around her like a shroud. Manipulated. Used. The possibility that Emma had orchestrated not just Victoria's near death, but Claire's own unwitting participation in it, was almost too monstrous to contemplate. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in a blanket of deceptive purity. Claire's taxi pulled away from St. Mary's Hospital as the afternoon light began to fade, carrying her back to a house that no longer felt like home, to chocolates that might be evidence, to the ruins of everything she thought she knew about the daughter she had raised and lost, and perhaps never truly known at all. The remaining chocolates sat on Claire's kitchen table like artifacts from an archaeological dig, each piece tagged with a small evidence marker that Detective Santos had placed with clinical precision. Claire had watched from her doorway as the forensics technician photographed them from multiple angles, collected samples, and sealed the beautiful Belgian confections in sterile containers that would reveal their secrets under laboratory lights. Now, 48 hours later, Santos sat across from her in the same chair Victoria had occupied on Christmas morning, his expression grim as he opened a manila folder that contained the death of Claire's delusions about her daughter. The results are conclusive, Santos began, his voice carrying the weight of unwelcome truth. The chocolates were deliberately contaminated, not just with nut particles, but with concentrated nut oils, almond and hazelnut extracts in quantities that would be lethal to someone with Ms. Chen's level of sensitivity. Claire's teacup rattled against its saucer as she set it down. Concentrated oils? This wasn't cross-contamination from a facility that processes nuts, Mrs. Maxwell. Someone added these allergens intentionally. The concentrations are far beyond what would occur naturally in chocolate production. Santos pulled out a laboratory report, its technical language stark with implications Claire didn't want to understand. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The kitchen seemed to grow smaller around Claire, the familiar walls closing in as the reality of Emma's betrayal settled into her bones. How much would someone need to know? About allergies, I mean. Enough to research lethal dosages. Enough to understand that even a small amount of these concentrated oils would trigger anaphylaxis in someone with a severe nut allergy. Santos leaned forward, his voice gentler but no less serious. Mrs. Maxwell, I need to tell you something else. Your daughter and her husband left town on Christmas Eve, shortly after the chocolates would have been delivered. Left town? Claire's voice sounded foreign to her own ears. According to their neighbors, they departed for what James Morrison described as a spontaneous holiday trip. Their house has been empty since Christmas Eve night. Claire stared at the evidence markers where her daughter's beautiful gift had once sat. She knew. She knew I would give them to Victoria. That's what we believe, yes? Emma Maxwell Morrison appears to have planned this very carefully. She knew about your estrangement, about your personality, about your relationship with Miss Chen. She counted on your predictable response to an unexpected gift. The word predictable hit Claire like a slap. Was she really so transparent, so easily manipulated? Had Emma studied her own mother like a chess opponent, mapping out her responses, her weaknesses, her capacity for spite? Detective Santos, Claire said slowly, am I going to be arrested? Santos regarded her with eyes that had seen too many families destroy themselves from within. That depends on several factors. Did you know the chocolates were contaminated when you gave them to Ms. Chen? Number? Of course not. Did you remember her allergy at the time you offered her the chocolates? This was the question that had haunted Claire for 2 days, the one that made her stomach clench with self-recrimination. Not consciously, but some part of me might have remembered. Mrs. Maxwell, I'm going to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. When you decided to give those chocolates to Miss Chen, what were you thinking? Claire closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that moment in her kitchen when Victoria had admired Emma's gift and Claire had seen an opportunity for petty revenge. I was angry at Emma for trying to manipulate me with an expensive gift after 3 years of silence. At Victoria, for showing up at my house pretending to care about my loneliness when she was the one who had betrayed my daughter. She opened her eyes to find Santos watching her with professional compassion. I wanted to hurt them both, in some small way. I wanted Emma's gesture to be meaningless, and I wanted Victoria to unknowingly participate in that meaninglessness. Did you want her to die? No. The word came out as a whisper. I never wanted that. I wanted them to feel some small portion of the pain they had caused. Santos made notes in his careful handwriting. Mrs. Maxwell, under the law, you could be charged as an accessory to attempted murder. You were manipulated, yes, but you also acted with what we call willful blindness, choosing not to remember something that might have prevented you from doing what you wanted to do anyway. The legal terminology felt like stones dropping into still water, each word creating ripples that would spread far beyond this moment. What does that mean? Prison? It means you need a lawyer. It means this case is going to get very complicated very quickly. Santos closed his notebook and looked at her directly. But Mrs. Maxwell, I want you to understand something. Emma Maxwell Morrison used you. She turned you into a weapon, counting on your emotions, your resentment, your very human capacity for spite. That doesn't absolve you of responsibility for your actions, but it does mean you were as much a victim of her manipulation as Miss Chen was. Claire felt tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed finally break free. How could she do this? How could Emma use me to try to kill someone? In my experience, people who plan crimes like this don't see other people as fully human. They see them as pieces in a game, obstacles to be removed or tools to be used. Your daughter needed someone else to deliver those chocolates to Ms. Chen. Someone who could do it without suspicion. You were the perfect, unwitting accomplice. But I'm her mother. Yes, Santos said quietly. And she used that too. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the heavy silence. Claire looked at the caller ID and felt her blood freeze. Emma's name appeared on the display, along with a number she didn't recognize. Should I answer it? Claire asked. Santos nodded, already reaching for his own phone. Put it on speaker. And Mrs. Maxwell? Remember that everything you say is going to matter in court. Claire accepted the call with trembling fingers, and Emma's voice filled the kitchen. Familiar, beloved, and now terrible in its casual normalcy. Mom? I just heard about Victoria. How awful. Is she going to be all right? The performance was flawless. Emma's voice carried exactly the right notes of shock and concern, as if she had practiced this conversation in a mirror. Claire found herself staring at Santos, who was quietly recording the call on his phone. How did you hear about Victoria? Claire asked. James saw something on social media. One of her friends posted about her being in the hospital. Mom, what happened? She had an allergic reaction to nuts. There was a pause, perfectly timed, neither too short nor too long. Oh no, I remember she was allergic to nuts when we were kids. How terrible. What was she exposed to? Claire felt something die inside her chest. Some last vestige of hope that this had all been a misunderstanding, that her daughter was innocent, that the laboratory results were somehow wrong. Emma's question was too precise, too careful. She was fishing for information about the investigation while maintaining her facade of innocent concern. Chocolates? Claire said simply. Chocolates? How awful. Where did she get chocolates with nuts? From me, Claire said, watching Santos's face as he continued recording. I gave her the chocolates you sent me for Christmas. The silence that followed was a fraction too long, and in that tiny pause, Claire heard the sound of her daughter's mask slipping. When Emma spoke again, her voice carried a note of something that might have been satisfaction, quickly suppressed. Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you would give them to anyone else. If I had known, well, of course, I would never have included varieties with nuts in the box. But she had known. She had counted on it. Claire could hear it now, in the careful construction of Emma's words, the way she was already building her defense, establishing her innocence while simultaneously confirming that she understood exactly what had happened. Emma, Claire said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Where are you? We decided to take a little vacation, get away for the new year. Mom, is Victoria going to be okay? She nearly died. Another perfectly timed pause. How horrible. Thank God she pulled through. Well, James is calling me for dinner. I just wanted to check on you and make sure you were all right. This must have been so traumatic. The line went dead, leaving Claire staring at the phone as if it might explain how the daughter she had raised had become someone capable of using her own mother as an instrument of murder. Santos stopped his recording and looked at Claire with something that might have been pity. Mrs. Maxwell, your daughter just confessed. She confirmed that she deliberately included nuts in a gift she sent to your home. Knowing about Ms. Chen's allergy and your relationship with her, that phone call is evidence of premeditation. Claire nodded, feeling numb. Outside, the post-Christmas snow was beginning to melt, revealing the brown grass and dead leaves beneath its pure white surface. Like everything else in her life, the beauty had been nothing more than a temporary illusion, hiding something far less pleasant underneath. The knock at Claire's door came at 8 o'clock on the evening of December 27th, soft but insistent, like a heartbeat against wood. Claire had been sitting in Robert's old armchair, staring at the empty space on her kitchen counter where Emma's chocolates had lived their brief, terrible life, when the sound pulled her back to a present she no longer recognized. Through the beveled glass, she could see Emma's silhouette, alone, smaller somehow than Claire remembered, her shoulders hunched against the cold. For a moment, Claire felt the old maternal instincts surge through her, the desire to protect and comfort her child. Then she remembered Santos's recording device, still sitting on her kitchen table, and Victoria's swollen face in the hospital bed. Hello, Mom? Emma stepped into the foyer with the careful movements of someone entering a potential trap. She wore an expensive wool coat Claire didn't recognize and carried a small overnight bag that suggested this visit was planned, calculated. I came as soon as I could get a flight back. Claire studied her daughter's face with new eyes, searching for signs of the monster Santos believed her to be. But Emma looked exactly as she always had, beautiful in a sharp, professional way, her dark hair styled to perfection, her makeup applied with the precision of someone who understood the importance of appearances. "You came back," Claire said, not moving from the doorway. "Of course I came back. When I heard what happened to Victoria, I knew you'd be upset. And when you mentioned you'd given her the chocolates I sent..." Emma's voice caught with what sounded like genuine emotion. "Mom, I feel terrible about this. If I had known you were going to share them, I never would have included any varieties with nuts." The performance was masterful. Emma's eyes filled with tears at exactly the right moment. Her voice trembled with precisely the correct amount of guilt and concern. But Claire had heard that phone call, had listened to her daughter fishing for information while pretending ignorance. She knew what lay beneath the surface now. "Come in," Claire said finally. "We should talk." Emma followed her to the living room, settling onto the sofa with the fluid grace that had always made Claire proud. Even now, watching her daughter arrange herself for maximum impact, Claire felt an echo of that pride alongside her growing horror. "How is Victoria doing?" Emma asked, leaning forward with convincing concern. "Your voice on the phone sounded so shaken." "She's alive," Claire said simply, watching Emma's reaction. A flicker of something, disappointment, crossed Emma's features before being replaced by relief so perfectly performed it might have been genuine. "Thank God. I can't imagine how you must have felt, Mom. To think that something I sent you nearly killed her," Claire finished. "Yes, that's exactly what nearly happened." Emma's hands twisted in her lap, a gesture Claire remembered from Emma's childhood whenever she'd been caught in a lie. "I should have been more careful about the selection. I just thought, I thought you'd enjoy them yourself. I never imagined you'd give them to someone else." But she had imagined it. She had counted on it. Claire could see it now in the way Emma's eyes kept darting toward the kitchen, as if she were confirming that the chocolates were truly gone, that her plan had worked exactly as intended. "Emma," Claire said quietly, "did you know I still see Victoria occasionally? That she lives in the neighborhood?" Emma's pause was infinitesimal, but Claire caught it. I might have assumed. Old habits, you know. You always were one to maintain connections." Another lie, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who had been practicing deception for years. Claire felt something cold settle in her chest as she realized she was looking at a stranger wearing her daughter's face. "The police want to talk to you," Claire said. Emma's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something calculating and dangerous underneath. Then the concerned daughter was back, eyes wide with innocent confusion. "The police? Why would they want to talk to me?" "Because someone contaminated those chocolates with concentrated nut oils, Emma. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing." Emma's departure left Claire's house feeling like a crime scene, the air thick with unspoken threats and the residue of lies. Her daughter's final words echoed in the silence. "I hope you know what you're doing, Mom. Family should come first." The barely concealed menace beneath that statement had made Claire's skin crawl. The phone rang 20 minutes later. Detective Santos's voice carried urgency she hadn't heard before. "Mrs. Maxwell, we found James Morrison. He's agreed to cooperate with our investigation." Claire sank into Robert's chair, gripping the phone with white knuckles. "What does that mean?" "It means he's willing to testify about your daughter's planning process, about how she researched Victoria Chen's allergy, about the specific oils she ordered online, about how she practiced her story for when you called her after the poisoning." Santos paused, and Claire could hear papers rustling. "Mrs. Maxwell, James Morrison has been living in terror for months. He knew what Emma was planning, but he was too frightened to stop her." "He knew?" The betrayal felt like a physical blow. James had always seemed so mild, so harmless. She'd attributed his nervousness around Emma to simple social anxiety, not to fear of his own wife. He's described a pattern of psychological manipulation and threats. Emma apparently told him that if he interfered with her plans, she would destroy his career and his family relationships. She had compiled what she called insurance files on everyone close to her. Financial information, personal secrets, anything she could use as leverage. Claire thought of Emma's performance in her living room, the way her daughter's eyes had gone cold when she realized Claire wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. "Detective, Emma was just here." "What?" Santos's voice sharpened. "When?" "She left about 20 minutes ago. She threatened me. Not directly, but the implication was clear. She expects me to protect her." "Mrs. Maxwell, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Dr. Kim called an hour ago. Victoria Chen has taken a turn for the worse. Her body is rejecting the medications, and she's developed complications from the initial reaction. She might not survive the night." The words hit Claire like ice water. Victoria, whose only crime had been accepting chocolates from a bitter old woman, might die because of Claire's petty spite and Emma's calculated revenge. "There's more," Santos continued. "James Morrison believes Emma is planning to visit Victoria at the hospital tonight. He thinks she wants to ensure Victoria doesn't survive to testify against her." Claire's blood turned to lead in her veins. "She's going to try to finish what she started." "We think so, yes. Mrs. Maxwell, I need your help. Emma won't expect us to be waiting for her if she thinks you're still protecting her. I need you to call her, tell her Victoria's condition has worsened. Maybe suggest that if Victoria dies, the investigation will be harder to pursue. You want me to help you catch my own daughter. I want you to help us save Victoria Chen's life and prevent Emma from committing murder." Santos's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Mrs. Maxwell, your daughter is planning to kill someone tonight. We can stop her, but only with your help." Claire closed her eyes, seeing Robert's face as clearly as if he were sitting beside her. Her husband had believed in justice, in doing what was right even when it cost everything. What would he expect her to do? "What do you need me to say?" Claire's hands trembled as she followed Detective Santos through the sterile corridors of St. Mary's Hospital, their footsteps echoing against polished linoleum that reflected the harsh fluorescent lights above. The recording device in her coat pocket felt like a stone against her ribs, a constant reminder of the trap she was helping to set for her own daughter. "She should be here by now," Santos murmured, checking his watch. "Your phone call was very convincing." Claire's conversation with Emma an hour earlier had been a masterpiece of manipulation. Claire playing the worried mother, suggesting that Victoria's deteriorating condition might actually work in Emma's favor, that if Victoria died, there would be no witness to testify about the chocolates. Emma had taken the bait with an eagerness that made Claire's stomach turn. "Room 314, Santos said, pointing down the hallway. "The uniformed officers are positioned at both ends of the corridor, but they'll stay back until we have what we need." As they approached Victoria's room, Claire could see through the partially open door. Victoria lay propped up in bed, conscious but clearly struggling, her breathing assisted by the soft hiss of oxygen. Dr. Kim stood beside the bed, checking monitors that beeped with mechanical urgency. Then Claire saw her. Emma stood at Victoria's bedside, her back to the door, leaning over the patient with what might have looked like concern to a casual observer. But Claire could see the tension in her daughter's shoulders, the predatory stillness that reminded her of a cat preparing to pounce. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," Emma was saying, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "When Mom told me she'd given you those chocolates, I felt terrible. If only I had thought to mention they contained nuts." Victoria's eyes were wide with fear above her oxygen mask. She'd recognized Emma's voice, understood who was really responsible for her condition. Her hand moved weakly toward the call button, but Emma intercepted it with gentle, restraining fingers. "Don't strain yourself," Emma murmured. "You need to rest. To heal." Claire stepped into the room, Santos close behind her. "Hello, Emma." Emma turned, and for a split second, her mask slipped completely. The face Claire saw was cold, calculating, utterly without remorse. Then the concerned daughter was back, eyes wide with innocent surprise. "Mom, I didn't expect to see you here. I just wanted to check on Victoria, to apologize in person. Apologize for what? Claire asked, her voice steadier than she'd expected. For the chocolates, of course. For not being more careful about including nuts in the selection. Emma's gaze flicked to Santos, taking in his presence with sharp intelligence. I don't believe we've met. Detective Ray Santos, he said, stepping forward. I'm investigating Ms. Chen's poisoning. Poisoning? Emma's laugh was perfect. Just the right note of shocked confusion. Detective, surely you don't think someone deliberately tried to harm Victoria? It was clearly an accident. A terrible case of cross-contamination. Actually, Ms. Maxwell Morrison, we know it wasn't an accident. Santos pulled out his phone, the recording of Emma's earlier call ready to play. We know you deliberately contaminated those chocolates with concentrated nut oils. We know you sent them to your mother's house, knowing she would give them to Ms. Chen. And we know you came here tonight to ensure your victim didn't survive to testify against you. Emma's expression shifted like quicksilver, from shock to calculation to something that might have been admiration for being caught so thoroughly. That's quite a theory, detective. Do you have any evidence to support these dramatic accusations? Your husband is cooperating with our investigation. He's told us everything about your research, your planning, your threats to keep him silent. Santos stepped closer to the bed, positioning himself between Emma and Victoria. James Morrison is afraid of you, Ms. Maxwell Morrison. He's been afraid of you for months. James. Emma's voice carried a note of genuine disappointment. I'm surprised. I thought he understood the importance of loyalty. The way you understood loyalty to your mother? Claire asked, finally finding her voice. When you used me as a weapon in your revenge plot? Emma turned to face her mother fully, and Claire saw her daughter's true face at last, intelligent, remorseless, and utterly self-serving. You were so predictable, Mom. So eager to hurt someone when you felt slighted. I barely had to nudge you in the right direction. You counted on my spite, Claire said, the words bitter in her mouth. I counted on your character, Emma corrected. Your judgmental nature, your resentment, your inability to forgive. You gave Victoria those chocolates because you wanted to hurt us both. Me for sending them, her for existing. I just provided the means. Victoria made a sound behind her oxygen mask. Whether distress or attempt at speech, Claire couldn't tell. But Emma heard it too, and her attention shifted back to the bed with laser focus. It's really too bad you survived, Emma said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. This would all be so much simpler if you hadn't. Emma Maxwell Morrison, Santos said, his voice carrying official authority, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Victoria Chen. Emma's laugh was genuine this time, bright and clear like the child she'd once been. On what evidence? The testimony of a frightened husband who can be made to say anything? The word of a bitter old woman who gave away chocolate she knew contained allergens? On this, Claire said quietly, pulling the recording device from her pocket. On everything you just said. Emma stared at the device, then at her mother, and for the first time since entering the room, she looked genuinely surprised. You recorded me? Every word, Claire confirmed. Including your confession. My confession? Emma's voice climbed with indignation. I confessed to nothing. I simply acknowledged that you acted according to your nature. But Claire could see it in her daughter's eyes. The recognition that she had revealed too much, admitted too much, let her arrogance override her caution. The perfect facade had finally cracked beyond repair. As Santos moved to handcuff Emma, she looked at Claire with something that might have been disappointment. I thought you'd understand, Mom. I thought you'd appreciate the poetry of it. Victoria betrayed me, and I used her betrayer's own mother to deliver justice. That wasn't justice, Claire said, watching her daughter's hands being secured behind her back. That was just revenge. And you used me to do your dirty work because you were too much of a coward to face Victoria yourself. Emma's expression hardened into something Claire had never seen before. Pure, undiluted hatred. You were always so weak, Mom. So concerned with doing the right thing that you never did anything at all. At least I acted. At least I had the courage to take what was owed to me. As the officers led Emma away, she called back over her shoulder, "Don't visit me in prison, Mom. I'm done pretending we're family." The words hit Claire like physical blows, but she remained standing, watching her daughter disappear down the hospital corridor. Beside her, Victoria had managed to remove her oxygen mask long enough to whisper, "Thank you." Claire nodded, unable to speak past the grief and relief warring in her chest. She had chosen justice over family loyalty, truth over comfortable lies. The cost had been everything she thought she wanted to preserve, but the alternative had been becoming complicit in murder. As Dr. Kim worked to stabilize Victoria's breathing, and Santos completed his paperwork, Claire stood at the window watching snow fall on the parking lot below. Somewhere in that white expanse, families were going home to warm houses and ordinary problems. But for Claire, there would be no going back to the illusion of normalcy. She had seen the monster wearing her daughter's face, and that knowledge would live with her forever. The grandfather clock in her empty house would soon chime midnight, marking the end of the worst Christmas of her life and the beginning of whatever came next. The courthouse steps felt treacherous beneath Claire's feet as she descended into the harsh January sunlight, the weight of her testimony still heavy on her shoulders. Inside, Emma's trial had continued without her, her daughter's defense attorney painting Claire as a bitter, manipulative woman who had deliberately given contaminated chocolates to an innocent victim. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to destroy the truth, Emma's lawyers had inadvertently described exactly who Emma herself had become. 3 weeks had passed since Emma's arrest. 3 weeks of media attention that had turned Claire's quiet neighborhood into a circus of news vans and curious onlookers. The story had captured public imagination. The devoted mother, unwittingly used as a weapon by her own daughter. The Christmas gift that nearly became a murder weapon. The bitter irony of family love, twisted into an instrument of revenge. Claire's front door bore the scars of reporters' persistence, scratches around the lock from attempted break-ins, tape residue from camera equipment, the ghostly outlines of business cards that had been shoved into every crevice. She'd stopped answering her phone days ago, letting the machine collect messages from producers wanting to buy her story, lawyers offering representation, and distant relatives she hadn't heard from in years suddenly eager to reconnect. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock, and Claire checked the window before answering. James Morrison stood on her doorstep, his shoulders hunched not against the cold but against the weight of his own guilt. He looked thinner than she remembered, his face bearing the hollow expression of someone who had lived too long with terrible knowledge. "Mrs. Maxwell," he said when she opened the door, "I hope you don't mind me coming by. I know this must be difficult for you." Claire studied Emma's husband with new eyes, seeing not the mild-mannered accountant she'd always dismissed as weak, but a man who had survived months of psychological torture. "Come in, James. We should talk." He settled into the chair that Victoria had occupied on Christmas morning, his movements careful as if he expected punishment at any moment. "I need you to understand something," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I tried to stop her. Not at the end when it mattered, but earlier. When she first started talking about Victoria, about getting even. What did she say exactly?" James's hands trembled as he reached for the cup of coffee Claire offered. "She started obsessing about Victoria about a year ago. Reading her social media, tracking her business success, watching her house. Emma said Victoria had stolen her life, and that she deserved to lose everything the way Emma had. But Emma rebuilt her business. She was successful." "Success wasn't enough," James said quietly. "Emma needed Victoria to suffer. She needed to win completely, and that meant destroying the person who had humiliated her." He paused, staring into his coffee as if it might offer absolution. "I thought it was just talk at first. Bitter fantasies. Everyone has revenge fantasies." "When did you realize she was serious?" "When she started researching allergies. When she ordered the nut oils online and had them delivered to our office instead of the house. When she began asking casual questions about your habits, your relationships, your predictable responses to emotional manipulation." James looked up, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "She studied you like a textbook, Mrs. Maxwell. She knew exactly which buttons to push." The words stung, but Claire forced herself to listen. She needed to understand how thoroughly she'd been played, how completely Emma had mapped her psychological weaknesses. The Christmas gift was the perfect delivery system, James continued. Emma knew you'd be suspicious of her motives, knew you'd feel manipulated by an expensive present after years of silence. She counted on your resentment, your need to strike back somehow. Did she know I would give them specifically to Victoria? She hoped you would, but she had backup plans. If you'd eaten them yourself... James's voice trailed off. Claire felt ice form in her stomach. She was willing to kill me too? Emma doesn't see people as individuals anymore, Mrs. Maxwell. We're all just pieces in her game. Obstacles to be removed or tools to be used. I think she stopped seeing you as her mother years ago. The admission hung between them like a death sentence. Claire had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed by someone who'd lived with Emma's twisted logic made it undeniably real. Why didn't you call the police? Claire asked. Before it happened? James's laugh was bitter, broken. Because I was terrified. Emma had files on everyone, my family, my coworkers, my clients. She showed me what she'd compiled on my sister, personal information that could destroy her marriage, her career. She made it clear that if I interfered with her plans, everyone I cared about would suffer. Claire began to understand the scope of Emma's psychological manipulation. Her daughter hadn't just planned Victoria's murder. She'd systematically isolated and controlled everyone around her, turning love into leverage and loyalty into fear. The night before Christmas Eve, when she was preparing the final chocolates, I begged her to reconsider, James said. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. She couldn't understand why I was upset about potentially killing someone who had gotten in her way. What will you do now? Testify, James said with quiet determination. Tell the truth about everything I witnessed, everything I should have stopped. Then disappear, probably. Emma has friends. People who believe her version of events. I don't think I'll ever be completely safe. After James left, Claire found herself wandering through her house like a ghost, touching objects that had once felt familiar but now seemed foreign. The grandfather clock that had marked the rhythm of her life for 30 years, the Persian rugs she'd saved for months to buy, the photographs of Emma at various ages. All of it felt contaminated by the knowledge of what her daughter had become. The phone rang and for once Claire answered without checking the caller ID. Mrs. Maxwell? The voice was weak but determined. This is Victoria Chen. I'm being released from the hospital tomorrow, and I wondered if you might like to have coffee sometime. The offer was so unexpected, so gracious given everything that had happened, that Claire found herself speechless. I know this is strange, Victoria continued. But I've been thinking about what happened, about how we were both used by Emma in different ways. I think we might help each other understand it. You want to see me? Claire asked, incredulous. After everything I did? You gave me chocolates you thought were a gift, Victoria said quietly. Emma sent chocolates she knew were weapons. There's a difference, Mrs. Maxwell. A big one. That evening, Claire sat in Robert's chair and wrote a letter she would never send. A final message to the daughter she'd lost, not to death, but to something far worse. She wrote about the little girl who used to braid flowers, about Christmas mornings when Emma's laughter had filled the house with joy, about the moment she'd realized that child had grown into a monster, willing to use her own mother as an instrument of murder. When she finished writing, Claire folded the letter carefully and placed it in the fire, watching Emma's childhood disappear into ash and smoke. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the world in fresh whiteness that would eventually melt to reveal whatever lay beneath. The worst part wasn't that Emma had tried to commit murder. The worst part was that she'd succeeded in destroying the mother who'd raised her, turning Claire into an unwitting accomplice in attempted murder. That betrayal would echo through every relationship Claire tried to build, every choice she made going forward. But Victoria's phone call offered something Claire hadn't expected. The possibility of redemption, of building something real from the ashes of deception. For the first time in weeks, Claire allowed herself to hope that the story wasn't over, that there might be chapters yet to write that didn't end in darkness. 1 year later, Claire Maxwell sat in the same wingback chair where she'd received Emma's poisoned gift, but the woman occupying that space bore little resemblance to the bitter, isolated person she'd been 12 months ago. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times on Christmas Eve, its familiar resonance no longer marking solitude, but the comfortable pause before Victoria's arrival for their traditional holiday dinner. The dining room table, unused for years before this past Christmas, now bore the evidence of careful preparation: her grandmother's china, the silver candlesticks Robert had given her for their 10th anniversary, and a centerpiece of winter roses that Victoria had helped her arrange that morning. The kitchen carried the warm sense of roasting turkey, and the apple pie they'd baked together, their friendship forged in the unlikely crucible of shared trauma and mutual forgiveness. Victoria arrived precisely at 7:30, as she had every Christmas Eve since her recovery, carrying a bottle of wine and the easy smile of someone who had learned to value simple pleasures. She moved more carefully now. The poisoning had left her with permanent sensitivity to certain foods, and a constellation of small scars from the medical procedures that had saved her life. But she also moved with the confidence of someone who had survived something terrible and chosen growth over bitterness. "The house smells wonderful," Victoria said, hanging her coat in the hallway where Emma's childhood photographs still hung, though Claire had added new pictures now, images of her volunteer work at the literacy center, photos from the support group for families of violent criminals that she and Victoria attended together. "Dr. Kim called earlier," Claire said, as they settled in the living room with their wine. "She wanted to wish us both a Merry Christmas." Dr. Kim had become an unexpected friend over the past year, her unwavering moral clarity serving as a compass for both women as they navigated the complex aftermath of attempted murder. She'd helped Claire understand that healing didn't require forgetting, that accountability could coexist with compassion, that she could mourn the daughter she'd lost while refusing to enable the woman Emma had become. "Any word from Emma?" Victoria asked gently. Claire shook her head. Emma had been sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder, but she'd maintained her innocence throughout the trial, painting herself as the victim of prosecutorial overreach and family betrayal. Her letters to Claire had stopped coming 6 months ago, when Claire had finally found the strength to return them unopened. The daughter she'd raised was gone, replaced by someone Claire no longer recognized or wished to know. "I wrote her one last letter last week," Claire admitted. "I didn't send it, but I needed to say goodbye to who she used to be." Victoria reached across the space between their chairs and squeezed Claire's hand. Their friendship was built on unusual foundations: attempted murder, betrayal, and the shared recognition that they'd both played roles in the cycle of resentment that had nearly destroyed them. But it was also built on honesty, on the understanding that redemption required accountability, and on the simple miracle of two people choosing forgiveness over vengeance. As they moved to the dining room for dinner, Claire caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back was older, marked by grief and wisdom in equal measure, but she was also someone who had chosen growth over bitterness, connection over isolation. The past year had taken everything Claire thought she wanted: her daughter, her illusions, her comfortable mythology about family loyalty, but it had given her something more valuable: the knowledge that she could survive the worst kind of betrayal and still choose to build something better from the ruins. Outside, snow began to fall on Christmas Eve, just as it had a year ago. But this time, Claire wasn't alone with her memories and regrets. This time, she was sharing dinner with a friend who understood the price of redemption and the possibility of grace. The grandfather clock chimed 8 as they sat down to eat, marking not an ending but a beginning, proof that even the darkest Christmas could give birth to unexpected light. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.